So we're joined today by Darren Sharp, who was CIO at TMK, but now is a consultant within the London market, particularly to do with technology, change, innovation, the stuff that we like to talk about on the show. And thanks for joining us, Darren. It'd be great to get your thoughts really about, I guess, how you see technology driving change in the London market, and perhaps we can then have a chat about where we think it might go.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for the invite. Good to see you both. It's probably worth talking about data alongside tech. And if I think about the last 10 years, probably there's been a huge change in that space. 10 years ago, data wasn't really talked about that much, other than perhaps some claims history and obviously bordereau, and we can talk about that in more detail. But things have changed hugely. And if you just look at Data Jam, which I attended last week, if you look at the nature and the solutions provided by some of the suppliers, at that event, you can see how things have moved on massively. There's a lot more people coming to the market and providing innovative solutions, kind of agile solutions. A lot of that's around AI, and we can touch on that a bit later. But I think the fact that we've got a lot more players means there's a lot more competition. That's driving up the capability of those suppliers and giving kind of customers a lot more to kind of get their head round and kind of embrace and bring into their organization in a way you couldn't a number of years ago. So it's definitely changing a lot. I think what's important as well for businesses and for CIOs in particular, I guess, is moving away from the historic approach of perhaps one big system that did everything, now moving to creating ecosystems. And I think I probably have James Russell to thank for a good definition of that at the event last week. An ecosystem really is creating a set of those systems that allow that data to flow backwards and forwards and get to the right people into the right systems. And if you can do that and design that well from the outset, it means as new systems come along, or you want to retire old systems, you can kind of chop and change stuff. My kind of CIO friends won't thank me for saying, it's really easy to move stuff in and out, but much easier than a big monolithic, multi-million pound big upgrade project that businesses, don't like waiting to get that new value. Yeah. So it has changed hugely in the market and definitely going in the right direction.
Do you think when we're talking about data and technology, and you were talking about there kind of the architecture to enable the ecosystems that we're looking to do, where do you think we're going to see the biggest impact of once we have that kind of technology, we're able to move data around in a much more kind of agile way? Where do you think we'll actually see the business impacted?
So there's probably two parts to this. One is, which internal customers are going to benefit from this. So I think you're going to see a combination at an individual level, whether that's claims professionals or underwriters, having data at their fingertips to make more informed, risk selection and risk decision and pricing. That's been talked about a long time. A lot of people talk about workbenches, et cetera. But if you can flow that data in the moment, it will give those individuals capability that they haven't had before, right? I think broader than that, it will allow organizations to look more holistically at their portfolio in more real time than they've been able to. So, probably right now, organizations are kind of looking back and seeing what things look like over the last year. It's going to give people much more kind of predictive analytics to say, we've made this decision a month ago or a week ago. Is it having the effect on our portfolio that we wanted to have? Yeah. So you're going to kind of get these kind of two parts to it. And I think the third thing here is about speed. I mean, the London market is not renowned for the speed of change. So if you can, shortcut that kind of that build-up period that says we can't really start this until we've got the data, and that takes several months, which you've already got that, it's going to allow you firstly to look at speed to market for new products, but again, it's also going to let you look at what's happening across the market and understand if the performance of those new products is going the way you want it to be. So yeah, you've got individuals, you've got overall analytics, and then you've just got the market being able to respond faster to what is an ever-changing world of risk, right? More
So
volatile
Darren,
world.
one thing I'm interested in is obviously there's sort of different types of data, aren't there? There's the financial sort of what we might call the kind of truth data, hard data, be seen as subjective type financial stuff. And the other thing in what you're saying is that the technology should free up time, shouldn't it? And then is there a sense that actually, if this is an art and a science, underwriting, let's just keep it to underwriting for a second, that you get better decisions because there's more time? Because one of the problems of the speed is just not enough time. There's so much administration and bureaucracy going on that you just can't, people get tied up in knots. So are there different types of data that start to come in more or less when you get into this new scenario?
Yeah, there are, you know, and if you look at things like, you know, compliance and regulation, that it's not easing up, is it? And, you know, and all these things add more and more and more burden to underwriters and underwriting teams and teams across these organizations as well. So you're absolutely right. You've got to create headroom for people to make better decisions. Now, having better data helps you do that, but if you're still then rushed off your feet, you're not going to make the greatest decisions. So utilizing some tech to flow the right data to people in the right timeline is important. Using AI in the right way, and we can talk about AI use cases, but you know, if you can create those bits of efficiency, you know, you don't want an underwriter swiveling in his chair and typing into a sanctions checking tool to know if you can write a risk. You know, that should be an instant flag that says yes or no. You know, and all these 5 minutes, 10 minutes here and there, they all add up. Yeah. So you know, getting those basics right are so important. You know, getting the foundations right is so important. There's no point having a nice shiny new system or AI tool if the foundations aren't there, because you're right, you're not going to have time to use it properly going forward.
So in some ways, we're potentially going back to like the market was when it started, where you were somewhat unencumbered by all this complexity and data and stuff. And actually, therefore, a sense that I have is actually you then create much more reliance on the people in those conversations and the relationship, particularly between the brokers and the underwriters, but also now the clients and everybody else involved in this. I mean, some underwriters have said to me now it's more about the whole proposition that we've got than just, you know, leaving an underwriter to write a policy somewhere for somebody.
And we have to remember it remains a relationship business, right? You know, I mean, there's massive value in that, and I don't think anybody wants that to go away, and I don't think anybody believes you could automate, you know, all risk placement in the market, at all. It's making sure that as kind of life gets harder and uncertainty increases, that you keep that space available for those relationships and the time that's needed for those relationships to keep happening. I mean, one way of looking at this, you know, because there's a school of thought that you know, the more data, the better, right? And I don't subscribe to that. I said the more better data, the better. And from a technology perspective, I think you need a different approach to those different types of data. So you've got the data, which is running the business, the compliance, external audit coming in, you know, proving everything is fine. And that's one set of data, and that's probably structured, and that's probably lots of controls around it to keep everybody happy, you know, and that will build over time. And then there's a second set of data which needs to have more freedom around it and less controls around it. And that's the kind of data that helps you understand your portfolio and helps you understand your pricing, and kind of gives you a platform to do that deeper analytics. And from an IT perspective and an architecture perspective, I think you need a very different approach. At UK, we called it a lab and factory approach. So you had a factory that you could rely on, churn the wheel, and you automated as much of that as possible. And you know, the data lineage was very clear, and you trusted that data. And then in the lab, freedom to play. You know, you've got some very, very intelligent kind of data scientists and data engineers, and you need to give them the ability to kind of utilize those skills. If you if you constrain them too much, then they'll move to another industry because they just won't be able to flourish here. So it's taking that step back, I guess, from a leadership perspective and saying, what do we want from this data? And then putting the right data in the right places with the right controls. And if you get that right, and it's not once and done. I mean, this is an evolving situation. If you get that right, but you listen to your claims team, you listen to your finance team, you listen to your underwriters about, what problem is it you're trying to solve by doing this, then you'll be in a much better position.
So what you've talked about, Darren, is a kind of incremental gains or changes to the way that we're writing London market business. So rather than what some people say is that we will see over the next 4 or 5 years a fundamental shift and rethink in actually how we bring capital and risk together in order to service clients. And so I just wanted, and you touched on AI, and there's obviously a lot of talk around it and its potential, generative AI, and how that could be used in the London market. I just wanted to get a sense of where you think this technology is going to drive change. And I understand the kind of incremental gains and the speed and that type of thing, but whether you see kind of a fundamental shift or that will allow new organizations to come along and actually just transform the industry that we know it now right now. Because you're right, it is slow to change, which is in some ways quite a good thing, because it means that actually you can probably look back and go, well, the processes are robust, we do service clients, but then on the flip side you go, are we missing potentially a trick in this?
Missing a trick. Yeah, that's a really good question. And so I think we should see a few things happening in parallel. So I think, technology should be making day-to-day life easier, right? If you implement it correctly, implement the right tools. So to Ben's point about that headroom and efficiency, and not as regulation grow, you don't want to be drowning in it, right? So let's assume for 1 minute that you're using technology to keep the kind of efficiency of your operation going well. That's one part. Then it's kind of existing new tech and emerging tech. Yeah, can it kind of transform the market in a way? Now we're seeing it in automated follow businesses, where you've got a small number of underwriters and a whole host of data scientists and tech folk, running some very clever algorithms to do the fast follow. So I think we'll see some more of that. I think we'll see that moving into parametric insurance as well, particularly with increased climate risk. So I've spoken to a number of people in the last few weeks about how they see that kind of product changing, and that's huge automation, right? Automatic payouts. And then the last thing, with increased volatility in the world and the increased need for new products and new services, this is where the likes of those LLMs and AI and other solutions should be able to help. So at Data Jam last week, I was talking to a table of people about getting unstructured data and making it structured. And actually, that's been a bit of an obsession of the market, to make it structured so that you can then do something else with it to get insights. Well, what if you didn't need to do that middle piece? What if you could just take several million rows of bordereau and ask an AI solution to say, tell me all about this. Tell me everything that's happening in my portfolio. Tell me what the trends are. Tell me what the risks are. Yeah. So that's one example. Then there's new products to support things like energy transition. So how do you price battery storage or carbon removal from the air without any of that claims history? And I was talking to someone the other day who is trying to see if they can use AI that's been used in the gaming industry, where they ask AI to play the game more times than anyone else could play it. They just tell it the rules of the game to see if the game is robust. Could you ask it to play the rules of kind of climate products or climate change to help underwriters and underwriting teams come up with strategies to help price those risks? So you know, there's the basics of all these things. There's the basics, and then there's the kind of shiny new stuff. But you don't move everything to the shiny new stuff, because if you don't get the basics right, you'll never have the time to do anything with the shiny stuff. Did that answer that question? I'm not sure it did.
Yeah, I think it did. I was going to. What I wanted to say was, and I will say it, is that seems to me, this is my hypothesis or challenge, I suppose. It seems to me a lot of what goes on around technology and the thinking drives towards automation or cost reduction of the existing business. In other words, the problem as it's perceived is we've got a very expensive cost base, and technology will alleviate that cost base in all sorts of different ways, but that's primarily the aim. But we've also talked on this show about, and other people like David Howden have talked about, the industry isn't really growing. The P&C industry isn't really growing because it's not innovating. So I wonder what your view is on how much the focus is on innovation. I get things like parametrics and things like that, but while they're innovative in a technological sense, it seems to me they're reductive in what they do, because they solve one problem at a time. You know, like if you miss your flight, you get a payment, or whatever it is, whatever type of product it is. But it doesn't necessarily look at the bigger issue, which is if my flight has gone down and I'm a business executive, I actually want to get a hotel and get home, and I need some other things that are more softer, subjective things to happen. But we don't address that. You know, we don't do that. And there's products like cyber and things where the service is now coming in and so on. So I was just wondering how much that you think all this data and stuff that's going on is moving towards allowing us to be more innovative as an industry.
Again, good question, Ben. Yeah, I mean, you know, as an ex-CIO, always pressure on costs, right? You know, and there's that risk if you're constantly looking at saving half a percentage point here and there, you're missing the bigger picture, right? So when you're looking at what you spend your money on, I think you need to be looking at value rather than cost. So you've got the running the business, and it makes sense to be constantly looking at how you can do that better. You know, especially if you're growing your business, you want to decouple your expense growth from your top line growth. Yeah, but that shouldn't be where all the effort goes. You know, that should be just something you do year in, year out. I think you need to have separate funds for innovation, and I think you need to be very clear what you mean by innovation as well. So there's innovation in terms of insurance products, you know, and the market's got a good reputation for doing that, you know, responding and being the only place to be able to insure certain things. And then there's being innovative as a market and as your own business. And I think they all go hand in hand. You know, there's a risk if you just focus on product, well, then you lose out on the speed to market, or you don't have the right data, you know, and you can't really launch that product well because of all the other things that are missing internally. So you've got to look at where that kind of lacking capability is in your organization, and make sure that in separate kind of ring-fenced investment is split appropriately. Yeah, but then there's the broader market piece, and I think there's great relationships across markets, and some organizations work well together in the innovation space. You know, between broker and carrier, for example, to come up with new products. Certainly Howden a good example there. Working with TMK. I wonder. I think innovation is a word a bit like transformation. It means different things to everybody, and I think it would be good as a market to perhaps get a few heads together and say, right, what do we mean by this, and what could we do individually that gives us competitive advantage, and what could we do collectively that gives the market, you know, competitive advantage to either grow the market or make sure the market stays relevant. So I think summary, probably splitting the two bits of spend, you know, running and optimizing your business, fine, but not at the expense of investing in new things, you know, and investing in doing things different. And you need a bit of a mindset change to do that.
Yeah, my concern, I suppose, is that if you look at London, it's also quite passive in terms of how it trades. Still, it's very much underwriters waiting for brokers to come to them. And you might argue, well, technology might make that worse, because everybody just literally sits in their office or at home pressing a button to do the existing thing, but the pie doesn't grow at all. Certainly talking to people who've been around in the industry for a long time, what they said about when they started was, well, I'd go out to somewhere in the US, find this, town or city or whatever that was, some oil or whatever, or some type of industry, and found that, other brokers hadn't really touched it, or, and suddenly I had a whole area, and people have made careers off that sort of stuff. But I just don't know if that's happening now. And I just wonder if data helps or hinders that in a way. It feels to me like you could create an environment or a different culture where you say to people, look, when you get this data or this really interesting stuff, ingest some other stuff, go external, go on to all the stuff you can do with AI. But whatever you do, get out there and meet people and talk to people about the problems they've got.
Yeah, completely agree. I mean, it shouldn't replace what people are doing. It should be, enhancing, augmenting, whatever word you want to use, right? Yeah, it's all too easy to say, well, I'll just live in my inbox, or I'll submissions are coming in and I'll just fire them backwards and forwards between people, and then suddenly you lift your head up and you wonder what's happened to the world. I mean, as a guy in tech for 30 years, my view is always, don't start with the tech, don't start with the data, start with the problem. What is the problem? And if you believe tech or data will solve it on its own, you're very likely to be wrong. You'll probably have the same problem, just a bigger bill, right? And particularly if you look at these things in isolation, you can end up with all manner of tech solutions, like a toolbox full of tools. You don't really know how to use any of them, and you've still got the same problem. So you've back to the kind of culture and mindset piece. You've got to understand what that problem is. You've got to think ahead about what problems are coming. That's hard, but you have to do that, and you have to do it on an ongoing basis, and then find the right solution. And sometimes the solution is change of leadership. Sometimes the solution is education, and sometimes it's tech. But most of the time, it's all of the above. Yeah.
So, do you think we need different types of different talent then from outside of industry, or do people in the industry get what's going on, or?
I think there's
some sort of cost-obsessed financial people, basically.
There's some fantastically talented people in the London market, and I think it's our kind of duty to allow them to use that talent, and we should embrace that talent and support it as best we can. I think there are gaps as well in experience and capability, and people shouldn't be afraid to go out and get that from outside of the market. I've seen that work in IT. I've seen that work really well. Bringing people from telco or banking or whatever, and they go, "Have you thought of it this way?" And you think, "Oh my God, no! We've all been so busy thinking about it from a London market perspective." I'm not saying that's the solution necessarily, but it brings that diversity of thinking and the challenge and the ongoing challenge. And I think that's possibly missing in certain businesses and certain lines of business, that a bit more of a challenge to think of, could we do it slightly different way? Yeah. And the answer might be no, right? But at least you've had the debate, and it's an informed decision rather than just, well, we'll just keep doing the same thing for a few more years and hope that we get a better outcome, So keep mixing it up, and keep, it's important to challenge yourself and important to challenge your team, but in a nice way.
So I was just going to finish, Darren, just by kind of asking you if you like to kind of predict the future. And you've talked a little bit about Smart Follow, and I think we could have. Ben's going to come in now, but you talked a little bit about.
Just such an easy question to finish on, Darren.
Yes,
just predict.
No problem. That'd be amazing. But you talked a little bit about Smart Follow and algorithmic underwriting and things like that. And it's an area that we've talked about a couple of times on the show. And then it was fascinating at Data Jam that we had that panel discussion. And they were talking at a very strategic level about how this technology could change and impact on all the things you've been talking about, and skills and capabilities came up because I think Faris is new to the industry and was attracted into the industry because of the exciting developments that we're seeing in kind of tech and ops. So yeah, just to finish, like, where do you think, what's the route? Have you got a kind of a North Star that kind of share?
It's a tough question, isn't it? I mean, as someone who's set up his own business, so if I had a crystal ball, that would be amazing, right? Look, I think the fact that you were able to put on an event called Data Jam and have a full house and have so many people from London Market there is testament to the change in mindset, and testament to the recognition, I think, that today's leadership understand that they've got to embrace technology more, invest in technology more to stay relevant for the market. So I can see that trend continuing. I think, again, to your point though, there's not divorce the tech from the people piece. So got to educate people, right the way through, board underwriters, staff at all levels, really help them to get the most out of these tools, get them involved in the decision making as well for those tools, and get people thinking about problem statements and trying to predict what problems there might be in the future. So I think if you can do that, I think you'll see the market more getting more and more out of technology and making better use of the data. Do I think something magical will happen in a couple of years' time and the whole market will change? No. I don't, but that's probably good, because I think there's a chance it could all kind of blow up if you did that. I think an evolution, but an evolution at growing pace with growing clarity of direction, I think is what we'll see.
So one thing, Dan, just to
I dodged that well, didn't I?
That was really good. Yeah. One thing I was just wanted to ask, because you've been in the the CIO, kind of role, how that works. And it seems to me that with things like AI and ChatGPT and things, they're the first type of tools really, beyond your kind of Microsoft type, Apple type stuff, desktop stuff, where you've really kind of potentially democratized use of technology to do things.
Yeah.
And that really interests me, because it seems to me that you've got a more of a bottom-up thing now, where people can go and play around with ideas for not much money, and then go and propose something to somebody in a big business as to how it will work. Do you think, do you think I'm kind of right in that, and that's got some legs? And also, does that potentially kind of break the what's that word, hegemony of the IT function that's largely determined everything in every financial services business?
Yeah, I do think you're right. I mean, Gartner used a phrase called citizen developer, right? And this is before AI came along. This was just other kind of tools in the Microsoft suite, and everyone was going to go off and build applications and stuff, and it didn't quite pan out that way.
No.
But you're right. I mean, you can have a small number of people on the board, or you can have several thousand people in the business every day coming up with new stuff. I mean, I know which one I would want, right?
Yeah.
So you have to enable that. But we're in a highly regulated industry here, so it comes back to that balance. And if you can allow people to use the tools safely, so you're protecting them, and that's the role of IT here and information security, right? Make sure they're safe, and a lot of that comes down to the real basic stuff around data access, right? AI will only find what you could find if you had the time to look for it manually, right? So you've got to get the guardrails in place to allow people to do it. Otherwise you're lining themselves up for issues as well, right? How did you do this? Where's this data come from? You've presented what to the executive, and you've said it's the truth. Then everyone kind of distrusts it. But if you get that right, then IT love that. I mean, a lot of people assume IT want to control everything, and they don't. They really don't. They actually want the business to be able to get on with their job and be happy doing it, because if the business is happy, then they're nicer to IT. So IT wants to support, the the pricing teams and data scientists to be able to crunch massive loads of data. They want to support the business to be able to do whatever their day job is more easily. It's just that balance. I mean, a CIO's job in financial services is hard because you're constantly, you've got infosec, service, and then business change, and you've got this constant pull of those three things all the time. But yeah, if you can get the business doing this and coming up with ideas, then that's like a hackathon every day, right? Brilliant. I mean, if a business can get that balance right, they're the ones that are going to rise to the top, and they're the ones that are going to truly come up with innovative ideas, and they will be driven, I think, from the employees, more likely the employees than from the board. It's fair to say, and understandably so, right? Nothing against the boards, but I think that's just reality.
Yeah.